Hi, I'm Marin. My parents skipped my wedding because I married a farmer. My father said walking me down the aisle would disgrace the family. They raised their glasses to my sister's husband instead, a man who made millions while calling hard work a fool's game. But when his empire fell apart and their savings vanished, they came crawling back, begging me to sell the very home they once laughed at. They didn't know. The farm was in my name. And the man they mocked had protected me better than they ever did. So tell me, when the people who broke you come begging at your door, would you open it or let them feel the cold? Before we begin, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Drop it below. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about finally choosing peace and never apologizing for it. I always imagined walking down the aisle would feel like the start of something. A soft beginning, like sunrise slipping into the day without anyone needing to announce it. But instead, that morning felt like a muted apology. The wildflowers looked tired, the barn smelled like rain-soaked wood, and the air carried a kind of hush that didn't come from reverence, but from discomfort. Rowan looked beautiful in the way men do when they're not trying. He waited for me at the altar with mud on his boots, which had dried into soft cracks by the time we said our vows. I didn't ask him to clean them. That mud came from the fields that fed us, paid the mortgage, kept the lights on. Let them see the dirt, I thought. What they didn't see, what they couldn't miss, were the 2 empty seats in the front row. My hands trembled as I held my bouquet. Every petal felt like it was mocking me. My Aunt Carol whispered something behind me. I couldn't make it out, but it had the cadence of pity. I kept smiling for the camera, not because I felt joyful, but because I refused to give them anything else. Rowan reached under the table during the reception and squeezed my hand. It was the kind of touch that didn't need words. 2 months ago, my father stood in our kitchen and said, "You're marrying dirt. Don't expect us to roll in it with you." He'd been sipping from his old coffee mug, the one that said, "Jazyarwan Dad" in faded red letters. He didn't yell. He never had to. His voice knew how to wound without ever raising. That same weekend, Cambria held her engagement party at a rooftop lounge in Des Moines. Champagne flutes, a string quartet, even a damn chocolate fountain. My mother posted a photo with the caption, "Our hearts are full. The future looks bright." They were all in shades of silver and navy, perfectly posed. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was a political fundraiser. Cambria's fiancé, Dorian, wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my wedding. The kind of man who calls himself a financial architect, which I've learned usually means someone who talks a lot and signs very little. They used to say those things about me, that I was going places, that I had promise. My mother had once told me, years ago, "We raised you for more than this." She said it slowly, like she was handing me back a receipt for a life she didn't approve of, and maybe I could have taken that if they hadn't promised me that house, the one in the suburbs they kept in the family. I'd visited it once in college. They told me it'd be mine when I got married. A fresh start, they said. But last week I saw the deed in Cambria's name on the county's public records. She hadn't even moved in yet, just used it for photo shoots and brunches. Rowan built our home, plank by plank. We don't have crown molding or marble countertops. We have floorboards that creak and a kitchen window that fogs up every morning. But it's ours. No one gave it to us. No one can take it. The wedding ceremony ended without applause. Just a few claps, some polite smiles. We didn't have a DJ. We had my cousin Eli with his acoustic guitar and a Spotify playlist that kept buffering. People avoided looking at the front row. I didn't mention the seats. I didn't move them. They stayed there all night. 2 white folding chairs draped with ribbons, meant for the people who gave me life and then chose to erase this part of it. We served barbecue from a local smokehouse. My cousin knocked over a mason jar of sweet tea. A baby cried during our first dance. Somewhere, a guest joked that the cake was lopsided, but no one said a word about the 2 empty chairs. After the sun dipped below the cornfields and the sky turned that dusty pink I'd always loved, Rowan and I stayed behind. The guests had gone. The tables were half cleared. Fireflies had started to blink near the tree line. I sat down on one of the empty chairs. My wedding dress had stains at the hem, soil and barbecue sauce, and something I couldn't name. I didn't cry right away, just sat there, listening to the night settle. Rowan didn't speak. He just placed a folded denim jacket over my shoulders and walked back toward the truck to start packing up. It took a while before I realized I'd been holding my breath. I looked at the second chair. I didn't know which one had been meant for my father, which for my mother. It didn't matter. I got up and left them there, a reminder, not of who didn't show up, but of who I chose to stop waiting for. I didn't cry again that night, but I didn't sleep either. 3 months passed. Autumn took over Linden Creek with its steady golden sweep. Burnt orange leaves across the back porch, pumpkins softening in the field, and the sound of dry cornstalks rustling in the wind like a reminder that things end whether you're ready or not. Every morning, I checked the mailbox. I'd never been one for waiting on invitations, but this one, it mattered in a way I hated to admit. Cambria was throwing a gala. Not just any celebration, of course. It was a black tie event to honor Dorian's visionary leadership in financial strategy. At least, that's what the online press release called it. Rowan didn't say much about it. He saw me check the box every morning and never asked why. He knew. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it was just an event, a shallow gathering for people who only spoke in wine pairings and hedge fund terms. But it still stung when no envelope came. No fancy card with gilded edges, not even a casual email, nothing. One Tuesday afternoon, I was trimming dead stems from the mums on our front steps when Leora texted me. "Look who I ran into last night. Thought you'd want to see." Attached was a photo. My parents, grinning wide, champagne glasses lifted, Cambria in a red satin gown that caught every spotlight like she was born for it. Dorian stood behind her like a politician, hand on her waist, eyes locked on the camera, like it owed him something. I stared at the screen for a while. The flowers I'd been tending slipped through my fingers and scattered across the porch. I didn't even hear Rowan drive up until his boots hit the gravel. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. That night, my mom called. The timing wasn't lost on me. One day after the gala, one day after the world had already seen the photos, her voice was as smooth as ever, the kind of tone people use when they want to sound pleasant, but can't help the bite underneath. "We were just thinking about you," she said. "How's farm life? Still playing with dirt?" I didn't flinch. I'd heard that one before. "Still pretending it's gold," I replied, steady as stone. There was a pause. She didn't laugh, didn't argue either, just sighed. "Well, we all make our choices," she said. "You chose yours." Then she hung up. I didn't mention the call to Rowan that night, but I noticed the next morning a small wooden plaque appeared beside our front door. He must have carved it in the shed when I wasn't looking. "Home is where you plant peace." I ran my fingers across the grooves of the letters. The wood was warm from the sun. That man. He didn't try to fix things with speeches or promises. He just made room for peace to grow. Still, something inside me twisted every time I thought about that photo. About the smiles they saved for Cambria. The way they erased me so publicly, so precisely, as if I were a blemish they'd learned to live without. Then came the package. No note, no return address I recognized. Just a small box, bubble-wrapped. Inside, a family photo in a silver frame. My parents, Cambria, Dorian. standing in front of a holiday tree, dressed like a magazine ad for generational wealth. The glass was cracked, maybe during shipping, maybe before. I held it for a long time. It would have been easier if I could just throw it away, but I didn't. I set it on the edge of the bookshelf, back facing out. Not as a tribute, but as proof. Proof that what I came from wasn't always something I wanted to return to. Rowan walked in from the barn later that evening. I didn't notice him at first. I was still staring at the broken frame. He didn't ask questions, just walked over, looked at it, then looked at me. "They didn't forget to invite you," he said. "They needed you to see that you weren't welcome." I nodded. That's the cruelest kind of message, the one they don't have to write. He took my hand, kissed my knuckles gently like always, and went to wash up. I checked my phone one more time before bed. Dorian had posted a photo on his business account, captioned with something like, "Proud to have lifted Cambria from small-town limits to real success." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. I wasn't tagged, but I was the punchline. I deleted the photo Leora had sent me, but I didn't throw out the cracked frame. I looked out over our fields, lit silver by the moon, and I whispered, maybe to no one, maybe to myself, "You can't shame someone who's stopped caring." But I hadn't stopped, not yet. I used to think time would dull the hurt, that if I just kept busy enough, the sting of being forgotten would fade into the background. But winter has a way of exposing what you thought you'd buried. By early December, frost had claimed everything. The fences, the fields, even the glass on our kitchen windows. Inside the farmhouse, it was quiet. Too quiet. Rowan and I spent our mornings repainting the kitchen walls, sealing drafts, mending fences before the next snow. But underneath the chores, I could feel it, that heaviness that silence leaves behind when you've run out of words to hide behind. One morning, while clearing out the attic, I found an old cardboard box pushed behind a stack of paint cans. The tape was brittle, yellowed at the edges. Inside were dozens of family photos, birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, all carefully dated in my mother's looping handwriting. At first, I smiled. The smell of old paper, the faces I hadn't seen in years. But the longer I looked, the stranger it felt. There were gaps, whole events where I should have been standing somewhere, a smile, a dress, a presence, but I wasn't. There was my 10th birthday, cake half melted under the summer sun. Cambria held the sparkler candles, grinning. I wasn't in the frame. Christmas, 1998. The family by the tree, my father's arm around Cambria, mother laughing. I must have taken the picture. That realization hit me harder than I expected. I had been the one behind the lens all along, documenting a family that didn't see me as part of the picture. I remembered being 17, sitting at the dining table while my father flipped through tax folders. Cambria was upstairs getting ready for prom. He had glanced at me over his glasses and said, "You're the practical one, Marin. Cambria's the face of the family. You'll keep us steady." At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I know it was a casting call. My role had been written before I was old enough to say no. That afternoon, as the snow started to fall outside, I went to the mailbox. There was an envelope with my parents' handwriting, not warm or familiar, just formal, almost clinical. The address read, "To Marin and husband." Not Rowan, not even a greeting. Inside was a typed letter, a family update, as if we were distant cousins. My father's signature at the bottom. "Dorian's company has officially gone public," it said. "We're thrilled to share that we'll be moving into a new home in West Des Moines. It's a wonderful new chapter for the family." No mention of me, not a single line. For a while, I just stood there in the kitchen, the letter open in my hands. The cracked photo frame from the gala still sat on the shelf above the fireplace. It caught the afternoon light, and for a moment, it looked like a thin web of ice spreading across glass. When Rowan came in from the barn, I must have looked worse than I realized. He brushed the snow off his jacket and studied my face. "They wrote," I said. "It wasn't really to me." He leaned against the counter. "What did they say?" "Just good news about the golden child." He didn't ask to see the letter. Instead, he nodded toward the half-finished greenhouse outside. "Come on," he said. "Help me with the frame. It'll take your mind off things." "I'm not in the mood to build anything." "You don't have to be," he said. "You can't change what they see, but you can grow something they'll never touch." I almost laughed. "You think healing looks like tomatoes and dirt?" He smiled. "No, healing looks like living." That night, after dinner, I sat at the table long after Rowan went to bed. The letter lay beside the cracked frame. The sound of the wind outside was like a whisper through old wood. I wasn't angry that they'd forgotten me again. I was angry that it still mattered. The next morning, while sorting through some old files, I stumbled across an account statement. One I'd kept years ago from my college savings fund. Only it wasn't there anymore. I remembered my father telling me the money had gone into long-term investments. But a name caught my eye: Dorian West Holdings, LLC. My heart dropped. It wasn't an accident. They'd taken what was meant for me and poured it into his empire years before he even became family. Later that day, I ran into Leora in town. She'd heard rumors, whispers that Dorian's company wasn't as bulletproof as he claimed. "Word is, he's leveraged up to his teeth," she said. "If those numbers slip, the whole thing folds." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. When I got home, I printed every email, every letter, every post. I started a small folder, not for revenge, not yet. Just proof. I told myself it was for closure, but deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something else. I set the cracked frame next to the letter. The glass shimmered faintly in the low kitchen light, like it was holding a secret. Maybe it was. I traced the fracture line with my finger and whispered to the quiet house. Maybe the cracks aren't just in the frame. Maybe they're in the family too. I stayed at that kitchen table longer than I meant to, staring at the cracked frame like it might speak. The wind outside had picked up, shrieking through the naked trees like something alive. Inside, the wood stove kept the chill back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something colder had crept in. The phone buzzed. A voicemail. I didn't recognize the number right away. It had been so long since anyone from that side of the family reached out, I almost didn't press play. But curiosity, or maybe a lingering ache I hated to admit still existed, made me tap the screen. "Hey, it's Cambria." Her voice cracked, almost too soft to catch. "You probably heard about the market dip. Dorian's fine, but, call me?" That was it. No, "How are you?" No apology. Just a tremble under her polished tone, the kind of falter people tried to bury with a smile. Rowan was in the other room, sanding a chair leg, but I knew he heard it. The way his sanding stopped, the pause in the air. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That silence was full of knowing. "She only calls when something breaks," he said later, pouring coffee. "Must be something big," I replied, sipping mine too fast, burning the roof of my mouth. She didn't even try to fake it well. That evening, I sat curled up on the couch with my phone, scrolling through Dorian's social media. Post after post, slick photos of luxury offices, announcements about European expansions, champagne-filled investor nights. But when I clicked into the comments, a different story bled through. "Still waiting on last quarter's report, Dorian? 2 months late. Investors deserve answers. Is this why your CFO retired?" I kept scrolling. The curtain was starting to slip. I leaned back, phone resting on my chest, and my father's voice came out of nowhere. Smart men know how to make money without getting their hands dirty. That's why they adored Dorian. He was the glossy package they could point to and say, "This is the future." I was just the reminder of everything they didn't want to be seen as: grounded, modest, working in dirt. The wind howled again, louder now. I pulled the quilt tighter and stood to stoke the stove. As I added a log, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Leora. "You didn't hear this from me, but Dorian's company's being audited." I stared at the screen, heart thudding slow and deep. It wasn't panic that rose in me. It wasn't joy, either. It was something heavier, like a weight finally acknowledging its own presence. Justice, maybe, or the possibility of it. Behind me, the cracked photo frame gathered a new layer of dust. I noticed it now every time I passed. Today, the fracture looked wider, like it had deepened overnight. And every time my phone lit up with another unknown caller, I saw it. The break wasn't just in the glass. It was spreading into everything they built. I didn't call Cambria back. I didn't text her. Instead, I went to the porch and watched the dark settle over the fields. Rowan joined me, coat half-zipped, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" he asked. "They invested everything," I said, voice quiet. He raised an eyebrow. "In Dorian. Their retirement fund, the money they used to lecture me about preserving." Leora confirmed it. He sipped his tea and stared out at the frozen horizon. "They didn't just pick a side, they bet everything on it." I nodded. "And now they want to see if I'll come in as backup." He set his mug down. "You don't owe them your silence or your help." "I know," I whispered, "but silence can be its own kind of truth." The next morning, I was peeling potatoes when my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me said not to ignore it. "Hello. Hi, is this Marin Blackwell?" A woman's voice, crisp, professional. "Yes, speaking. This is Vesper Lowe. I'm a journalist with the Iowa Ledger. I know this is unexpected, but I'm working on a piece involving Dorian West and early investor documentation. Your name came up in some filings." I nearly dropped the peeler. "What kind of filings?" "Corporate structuring, early-stage investments. Your name was listed as a co-signer on a few documents submitted in the early funding rounds. Did you consent to that?" I laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "No," I said. "I didn't even know there were documents." There was a pause. "Would you be willing to speak on the record?" I didn't answer. My hands were trembling. After we hung up, I walked into the living room, sat on the couch. The stove crackled behind me, warm and steady. I stared at my phone in my hand. Rowan came in with his boots tracking snow. He stopped when he saw me, eyes narrowing with concern. "What happened?" "They used my name," I said. "Years ago, on investment paperwork, without asking." He sat beside me, jaw tightening. "They made you part of it." I nodded slowly. "And now someone else knows." Outside, the wind roared again, but louder this time, like a storm wasn't just coming, it was already here. And I sat there, phone still warm in my palm, frozen between fear and fury. They always said I'd regret marrying a farmer. I wondered when they'd start regretting marrying a fraud. I knew then that silence had ended. The storm I'd been waiting for was finally on its way. And this time, I wasn't the one running. The snow had melted, but Des Moines still felt gray. The kind of chill that sticks to your clothes and seeps through your ribs. I hadn't been back since the wedding. Driving into the city felt like slipping into an old coat that no longer fit. The skyline looked the same, but everything about me had changed. I parked outside a cafe downtown where I was meeting Leora. She was already there, waiting in a corner booth, stirring her coffee, though it had gone cold. When I sat down, she slid a manila folder across the table without a word. "Tell me I'm overreacting," she said softly. Inside were printed pages, official, stamped, undeniable. Documents from Dorian's early investment rounds, each one with my name and signature at the bottom. "They used your name, your social security number," Leora said. "He registered you as an initial silent partner. That's how they secured credibility early on. You were the hometown success story, the grounded one who made the business look trustworthy." I stared at the papers. "So I've been helping fund his empire without knowing it." "Not just that," she added. "You might be liable if things collapse. They tied your name to some early loans." I took a slow breath, steady, controlled. Of course they did. When I left the cafe, the city felt colder. I drove past the neighborhoods I grew up in, familiar streets now dressed in new money. And before I knew it, I was parked in front of my parents' house. The place looked untouched by time. Manicured lawn, white brick, glossy front door. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, gold frames, silence that smelled expensive. My father appeared first. He looked surprised, but only mildly, like I was a package that arrived without a return address. "Marin," he said, cautious. "Didn't expect you." "I bet." I dropped my coat over the arm of the couch. "Did you know my name was used on Dorian's business filings?" He blinked, slow. "You're overreacting. It was just for optics. He's a businessman. You wouldn't understand." "Optics?" My voice didn't rise. It sharpened. "You mean he's a fraud, and you were his cover?" He exhaled, annoyed. "Watch your tone. We did what was necessary to protect the family's reputation." "By selling mine?" Before he could respond, I heard footsteps, heels clicking fast across the tile. Cambria appeared, hair perfect, hands trembling just enough to betray her composure. "You've always been jealous," she spat. "You can't stand that he built something real. He made something of himself, unlike you." I met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "He made something out of everyone, else's money, including mine." Her face twisted. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do." I pulled the folder from my bag and set it on the table between us. "I have proof. My signature, his filings. He used me as his puppet before he ever said I do to you." My mother appeared in the doorway, silent. She didn't defend me. She didn't deny it. She just folded her arms. That same gesture she used when I was a child, being scolded for things I didn't do. Father's voice turned cold. "You always find ways to make things about yourself." "Funny," I said, smiling faintly. "That's exactly what you taught me." For a long moment, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, one of those expensive, polished ones that sounded too mechanical to feel human. I picked up the folder, walked to the dining table, and dropped it in front of them. Pages scattered across the marble surface. "You wanted proof of my worth?" I said. "There it is." Then I turned and walked out. No shouting, no tears, just the sound of my boots on the tile and the faint echo of my mother's bracelet clinking as she folded her arms tighter. In the hallway, a family portrait hung in its usual place, me, Cambria, and our parents. I was smiling, maybe 17, framed neatly between them. For the first time, I saw it clearly, not as a memory, but as evidence. I didn't belong there anymore, and that realization didn't hurt the way I expected. It felt clean. Outside, the air was crisp, smelling faintly of rain. I stood under the streetlight, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text. "You don't know what you've done, Marin. We need to talk." "Dorian!" My fingers tightened around the phone. Somewhere behind me, a wind gust rattled the bare branches, the sound sharp and hollow. I looked up at the night sky, my reflection caught faintly in my car window. Not the same woman who once waited for their approval. I knew then that silence had ended. The storm I'd been waiting for was finally on its way. And this time, I wasn't the one running. The sky over Linden Creek looked innocent enough. Clear blue, a few soft clouds drifting past, but I could feel it. That subtle pressure in the air, like the land itself was holding its breath. It had been 3 days since I left Des Moines. 3 days since I dropped the truth like a brick on my parents' polished floor. And now the quiet was turning hostile. My phone rang for the 6th time before 9 a.m. The screen lit up with unfamiliar numbers, some local, some not. I let them go to voicemail. When it buzzed again, I didn't even check until I heard the preview flash across the screen. Cambria. Fix this, Marin. You started it. The message was short, accusatory. No greeting, no apology. Just an order dressed up as desperation. By mid-afternoon, the silence around the house had changed. It wasn't peace anymore, it was preparation. Rowan had gone out to mend one of the field gates. I was in the kitchen, folding towels, when I heard tires on gravel. I peeked through the window. It was them, my parents. I stood still as they got out of the car. My mother's eyes were swollen, her lipstick uneven. My father's suit didn't fit him right. It sagged on his frame like the fabric itself had given up. They didn't knock. They waited. I opened the door without a word. My father's voice cracked slightly, but he kept the old tone. "We thought we could speak to you, in private." "I don't hide anymore," I replied. "So speak." He hesitated. Then, "They froze our accounts, the house, the savings, everything. Dorian says you can fix this." I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You didn't come to my wedding, but now you come to my doorstep?" My mother stepped forward, reaching out lightly like I was still her little girl. "Please, Marin, you can sell the farm." Before I could answer, Rowan came in through the side barn door, wiping his hands on a rag, face calm but steady as stone. "You mean her farm," he said simply. The color drained from my father's face. A flash of memory crossed my mind. Rowan and I, months ago, in the courthouse. He'd transferred ownership quietly, without a word of ceremony, just a signature and a kiss on my forehead. "This land's yours," he'd whispered, "so no one can ever take it from you." My parents said nothing. They didn't have to. The silence screamed. Then, as if perfectly timed, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled it out and read the subject line of the email. From Dorian subject, legal notice, defamation and interference. The message was brief, full of legal language and self-righteous tone. He accused me of libel, of malicious interference, threatened exposure if I didn't publicly defend him. He CC'd my family and 2 lawyers. I read it twice before setting the phone down on the kitchen table. "I guess I should be flattered," I said dryly. "He's finally giving me the credit he never did before." My father stepped closer. "You're making this worse for everyone. We're in this together." "No," I said, my voice hardening. "I was put in this. I didn't choose it." My mother's voice cracked. "You're our daughter. Don't destroy what we built." "What you built?" I shook my head. "You mean the image, the illusion. You let a liar use me as a prop, and now you want me to fix it?" Rowan spoke again, low but firm. "They taught you shame. Maybe it's time you teach them consequence." I turned to my parents. "You want to talk about destruction? This is what it looks like when people stop being afraid of losing your love, because they finally realize it was conditional." Behind me, I heard a soft crash. We all turned. The cracked frame, the one that had followed me through every chapter of this unraveling, had fallen from the shelf. This time, the glass shattered completely. I walked over, crouched down, and picked up the pieces with care. For a moment, I stared at the broken photograph, then dropped it straight into the trash. The break was clean. My parents left not long after. There were no hugs, no final words, just the sound of gravel beneath tires and the door clicking shut behind them. As dusk settled, I poured myself a cup of tea and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside were the documents from Leora, emails I'd printed, screenshots, photocopies of my signature forged on investment paperwork. I'd gathered everything. I just hadn't realized until now how much of it I'd already been holding. I stacked it neatly, every page a piece of truth. Then I found the folder with the deed, my name, bold and unchallenged, right at the top. Later that night, another email came. From Cambria. The subject line simply read, "How could you?" No body text. Just that. She believed I'd leaked everything, that I'd sabotaged Dorian. I could feel it through the blank message, her voice, tight and betrayed. I didn't reply. Instead, I took the stack of papers, slid them into a large envelope, and sealed it shut. The air in the room had changed. It didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like control. Rowan walked in, brushing dirt off his sleeves. He looked at the envelope, then at me. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. He wanted a war built on lies. I was about to hand him the truth. The courthouse loomed ahead like a monolith, cold, colorless, and far too quiet. I stepped out of the car, Archer on one side, Rowan on the other. Cameras flashed, voices rose behind barricades. Reporters called my name, not as Marin Pike, not as a daughter or a wife, but as the woman Dorian used. I kept walking. Inside, the marble floors echoed with every step. My parents sat stiffly at the far end of the waiting area. My father wore the same navy suit from the last time we'd met. It looked more like armor now. My mother looked older. Her eyes were puffy, her hands clenched together in her lap. Cambria sat beside them, staring at the floor. She didn't look up. She didn't have to. I could feel her judgment from across the room. The bailiff opened the door. "All parties, please enter." The hearing room was small, clinical, no jury, no drama, just paperwork, lawyers, and consequences. I sat between Archer and Rowan, my hands folded, my breath even. Dorian entered 10 minutes later, flanked by 2 attorneys. His hair was still perfect, his tie, silk. But his confidence cracked the moment the judge addressed the room. "Dorian Vestal stands accused of fraudulent misrepresentation, identity misuse, and financial misconduct. Mrs. Pike," the judge turned toward me, "you've submitted new material. Please proceed." Archer rose smoothly. "Your Honor, this flash drive contains digital records, emails, transaction logs, and timestamps that confirm Mr. Vestal forged documents using Mrs. Pike's name and social security number to open accounts and secure early investment." He handed the drive to the clerk. Screens lit up in front of us. The room dimmed slightly. First slide, an email from Dorian to a venture partner. "She'll never know, it's just optics." Second, a bank form with my forged signature, dated 3 months before I'd even met the man. Third, a timeline of fund transfers, from accounts I didn't know existed. The walls didn't shake, no dramatic gasp. But I watched Dorian's shoulders tense, his jaw clenched, and then he snapped. "You were nothing before me," he shouted, lunging forward before his lawyer pulled him back. "You were a background character." I met his eyes and spoke evenly. "And you're nothing without me." The room went silent. Not just quiet, still. Even the judge paused. Outside, the media storm broke loose the second the hearing ended. Microphones thrust in my face. "Mrs. Pike, do you feel vindicated? Did your family know? Will you be pressing charges personally?" I said nothing. As we exited the building, my father stepped forward, hands out as if that gesture could rewrite history. "Marin, We were trying to protect you." Rowan stepped between us, calm but unyielding. "By selling her name?" My father's mouth opened, then shut again. He looked smaller than he ever had in my eyes, smaller than the lies he once thought would shield him. We drove home in near silence. The sun had begun to set, throwing gold across the fields. At the farmhouse, I changed into jeans and a flannel, needing the softness. Rowan lit a fire on the porch, the kind that doesn't cook anything but gives you warmth just the same. I sat, mug in hand, watching fireflies float above the pasture. The air smelled like summer and endings. I should have felt victorious. I had done what none of them thought I had the nerve to do. I had exposed the golden boy, severed the family lie, walked through hell and back in full view of the press. But all I felt was heavy, like every truth I'd spoken had its own weight and I was carrying them all at once. Inside, Rowan hammered something gently into the wall near the entryway. When I came in later, I saw it. The wooden plaque he'd once tucked away after my mother's comments years ago. "Home is where you plant peace." This time, I smiled. Not out of irony or bitterness, just peace. An hour later, while brushing my teeth, I noticed the voicemail icon on my phone. I pressed play. It was my father. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Broken, trembling, stripped of performance. "Marin, we don't have anywhere to go." The voicemail echoed in my ears long after I hit pause. "Marin, we don't have anywhere to go." Just 9 words. But they carried the weight of generations, of silence, pride, and decisions built like walls between us. The next morning, the sky was that strange, early autumn shade of copper, soft but somber. Rowan and I were stacking crates of late tomatoes onto the truck bed when I saw it. The dusty gray sedan pulling slowly into the drive. My stomach tightened before my brain caught up. It was them. The car door creaked open, and my father stepped out first. Thinner than I remembered. His shoulders didn't carry the same weight they used to. They sagged like someone who had run out of performances. My mother followed behind, her purse clutched to her chest like a lifeline. They stood there, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked toward them. Rowan stayed behind me, but close. Always just close enough. My father cleared his throat. "We lost the house. Cambria's staying with friends. We don't have anywhere." I nodded. "I see." His eyes scanned the farmhouse, the fields stretching behind it. "You did all this?" I didn't answer. Rowan did? "We did." There was no condescension in his voice, just fact. That word, "we," sat between us like a fence post, clean and steady. My mother took a hesitant step forward, the gravel crunching under her shoes. "If we could just stay for a while, until we figure things out." Her voice didn't carry the old edge. No accusation, no control. Just weariness. Everything in me bristled, not with anger, but memory. Years of being invisible. Years of being the background to someone else's spotlight. Years of being told I was less, until I stopped needing their approval. I looked at Rowan. He stepped back, giving me space. And then I looked out at the land, the rows of vegetables we'd planted, the barn we'd rebuilt after that storm 2 summers ago, the chipped porch I still hadn't gotten around to repainting. This was our peace, hard-earned, hand-built. I turned back to them. "You can stay in the guest house, not forever, just long enough to start over." My father blinked. "You'd do that after everything we said?" I took a breath, steady and deliberate. "Because I'm not you." For a moment, no one spoke. The breeze picked up, rustling the drying cornstalks nearby. My mother looked away, my father stared at the ground. And me, I just stood there, realizing how much strength it took not to yell. Later that afternoon, we helped them carry in a few worn suitcases. The guest house hadn't been used much since Rowan's cousin visited 2 years ago. It smelled like cedar and mothballs. My mother said, "Thank you." My father didn't speak again. By evening, Rowan and I sat on the porch. He handed me a mug of tea. The sky was turning lavender now, stars beginning to peek through. We watched the lights in the guest house flicker on. "She noticed the sign," Rowan said, motioning with his chin. I followed his gaze. Above the porch door hung the wooden plaque he'd carved for me our first winter together. "Home is where you plant peace." I didn't say anything, neither did he. Later that night, the phone buzzed again. I stepped away from the table, wiping my hands on a dish towel, and answered without looking. "Cambria." Her voice was sharp, brittle. "You turned them against me. They're siding with you now. Do you realize what you've done?" I didn't yell. I didn't engage. "You made your choices," I said simply, "and I made mine." She hung up before I could say more, but I didn't need to. After dinner, Rowan and I settled back onto the porch. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, crickets chirped, and the wind carried the scent of hay. Rowan checked his phone and handed it to me. It aired. I watched the clip. A national news anchor summarizing the final twist in Dorian's story. The plea deal, the confession, the public acknowledgement that he had used my name, my information. He had credited my evidence for the conviction. For the first time in a long time, my name was tied to something real, something right. People were starting to see the truth, not just about him, but about me. And maybe that was enough. That night, after brushing my teeth and folding the last load of laundry, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The guest house light was off. My parents were asleep, or at least pretending. I looked up at the stars, clear and quiet. "You can forgive without reopening the door," I whispered. Sometimes that's enough. The stars were fading when I finally stepped back inside. I made my way quietly through the kitchen, the old boards creaking under my feet like they always had, but softer now, like even the house had learned how to breathe again. The days grew shorter after that. Autumn rolled in without apology. The trees traded their bold greens for rust and gold, and the fields stood bare, harvested and resting. Life slowed, but it didn't stop. Every morning, I stood by the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sun pull itself over the edge of the earth. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things finally laid to rest. My parents never said much after moving into the guest house. They showed up early, helped with what they could. My father repaired the fencing on the west side without asking. My mother baked loaves of sourdough that made the whole house smell like my childhood before things got complicated. They didn't apologize, not with words at least. But the venom that once filled the space between us had drained away, replaced by something quieter. Not closeness, but civility. And for now, that was enough. One chilly morning, as Rowan hauled a crate into the barn, I found an envelope tucked inside our mailbox. No return address, just my name in shaky handwriting that I hadn't seen in years. Cambria. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper. Not elegant, not emotional, just honest. "I still think you wanted this, Marin, but I can't keep being angry. Maybe you were right. Maybe we were all blind. Maybe I still am." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the drawer beside the kitchen sink. I didn't keep it out, but I didn't throw it away either. That weekend, a local reporter named Vesper Lowe came by the farm. She'd done the original story when everything fell apart. Now she was back for a follow-up. "From outcast to survivor," she said, adjusting her scarf. "Our readers want to know, how'd you do it?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the answer was so much simpler than she expected. "Forgiveness isn't strength," I told her. "It's just choosing peace when anger costs too much." She nodded, wrote it down. But I could tell she didn't really get it. Maybe one day she would. That evening, Rowan and I hosted a small dinner. Nothing fancy, just stew, cornbread, and cider that warmed your hands. Our farm workers came, along with a few neighbors who had stood by us when it would have been easier not to. The guest house door creaked open as the sun dipped behind the hills. My parents stepped out, hesitated, then took the two open seats at the far end of the table. No one made a big deal out of it. That was the best part. For once, everyone was just people. No performances, no judgment. Laughter rolled across the table like music. I caught my mother smiling at something one of the field hands said. My father nodded along to a story Rowan told about a broken tractor belt and a determined chicken. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like breathing after holding it too long. After everyone left and the dishes were drying on the rack, I lit a small candle and placed a new photo frame on the mantel. Just me and Rowan, arms slung around each other, dirt on our faces, sunlight catching us mid-laugh in front of the house. No missing pieces, no empty seats. You know, Rowan said, leaning beside me, they used to call this place the dirt farm. I smiled. Then I guess we built a life from dirt. That's more than they ever built from pride. He reached for my hand and didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Word trickled out over the next few weeks. Dorian had taken a plea deal. The papers said he'd spend the next several years behind bars, and that my evidence had materially contributed to the prosecution's case. For once, my name in print didn't come with a shadow. Just truth. Cambria started therapy. At least that's what the rumor mill said. I didn't check in. I didn't cut her off either. Some roads mend slowly, or not at all. My parents stayed quiet, humbled. They didn't ask for more, and I didn't offer. They'd found something in the simplicity here. I saw it in the way my father handled the tools now, in the way my mother didn't rush through baking. Maybe peace had to strip you down before it could settle in. By November, the farm was thriving. We had plans for a new greenhouse, and I'd filed paperwork to start a small foundation, one that would help women like me get their hands back in the dirt and reclaim something for themselves. That night, as the wind picked up and the first frost touched the windows, I stood on the porch again. I thought about everything we'd lost, everything we'd rebuilt, and everything that still waited for us. I spent half my life trying to be seen by people who refused to look at me. I whispered to no one. Turns out, the moment I stopped asking for their eyes, I found my own reflection. The stars above blinked back, and I finally felt whole,